Hey, Doug.
How you doing?
Okay, and you?
Yeah, doing all right. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me back.
It's a pleasure to have you back. And congratulations on the new book. Very
Yeah,
pleasant, man.
thank you. Yeah, it's been a long time coming.
Yeah. I know on Talking Back to Suicide, we briefly touched on it. So yeah, I just want to say congratulations. At least it's finally out there. I mean, it's a book that has so much value on such an important topic, grief.
Yeah,
Well, for listeners, the name of Doug's new book is called Grief. I actually want to pull up the book on the screen just to show people the cover. For new listeners, Doug is not a new face on the show. I've had the pleasure of chatting to him on the show before with regards to his career, Talent C, his mentorship career and program. And the book was You Are Not Alone. Yes, I'm correct. You are not alone. So I'm going to pin that show to this show on Spotify for new listeners to actually go back to it and hear about Doug's journey and life. Whereas this show, we're going to focus on Doug's new book. So let me share my screen just to show everyone the cover of the book. Here we go. Grief, a
there we
silent
are.
pandemic. There we are. There's two words that stand out to me: grief and pandemic. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So that is the book that we are going to be touching on today. A global pandemic. I mean, there's a difference between epidemic and pandemic, right?
Correct.
Well, there's a difference. So by mentioning pandemic, we're talking that this is a global issue. It's a global issue.
And
Correct.
I had actually read an article here just the last couple days that actually talked about that and the fact that, you know, we seem to be reluctant to move down that path where we see things from a pandemic perspective, which is what grief has become. You know, it's all consuming, and we just need to be more. It's like a lot of other things that, you know, the issues that we have with mental health and stuff like that is we just need to be able to embrace what's before us and do the best we possibly can in order to enable us to deal with these in a more positive light.
Nicely said. Nicely said. So, Doug, when we talk about, before we get to all the awesome value in the book itself, when we talk about grief, what is the definition of grief and what does it mean for a person to grieve, in your
I,
words?
it, yeah, I was actually asked that very same question yesterday. The definition of grief, and for me, what it is it's a response to a response spiritually, physically, mentally to something that has occurred to someone that causes the body and the individual to react to that change in a environment will for lack of a better choice of words. And so the body responds to it, and one of the ways that the body responds is through the expression of emotion, which is the grief part. and and from there, then you can certainly you take a look at grief from the aspect of, I can be experiencing grief today because I have a friend who is very ill, and there's a good possibility that they may not be with us much longer because they're fighting a losing battle, dealing with an illness. So that's my definition of grief.
Yeah. And it's something that you go on to say that, it's so misunderstood globally, which is so true. And that's a result of people not knowing how to deal with that specific emotion in that period of time after that loss. And then they end up so overwhelmed, they're so confused, they're getting advice, from psychologists, from family, friends, but it's not really helping them through that process. Why do you feel that it's so misunderstood globally? Like, what is the cause of that?
The number one is there's so many people in the world today globally that are struggling with healing as a result of the loss of a loved one, as a result of a broken up relationship, as a result of a number of different factors. And we sometimes prefer to just bury our heads in the sand, or the ostrich syndrome, as I call it. We prefer to just bury our heads, and that way, if we can't see it or hear it, then therefore it must not be taking place. On the flip side of that, what we need to be able to do is reach out and ask people for help. I'm really struggling. And those people that we reach out to need to understand, for the most part, what their role actually is in the grief process, in that, you know, we want people that are good at listening and hearing. We want people that are respectful, that are willing to build trusted relationships in order to be able to help people go through and deal with grief. And the other part that's really important to me is, if you make a commitment to somebody who's grieving, you better bloody well lived up to that commitment.
Yeah. It's we isolate ourselves, right? You know.
Right.
Now, but if you have to think like outside the box here and we look externally about all the distractions, especially living in this digital age and with social media, do you feel like we isolate ourselves because we are afraid people are going to judge us for how we're feeling in that moment? You know, because it's so easy for someone to say, hey, just get over it. It's life, it happens.
Yeah.
But you don't understand my feelings. You don't understand what I'm going through. I'm not as strong as you, or maybe you haven't experienced what I am. So it's not so easy for me to just get up and, walk away smiling, thinking, okay, it's back to normal. It's not so easy. So I feel like for me, when I observe the observe the world, um, there's so much external factors, negative external factors, that plays a role in, let me just room, let me lock the door, isolate myself, distance myself from my family, friends, whoever, because that's going to work for me now. But it's not the ideal way to go about it.
No, it's a short-term solution to a long-term problem, is really what it is. And I think that a large part of what we do is, we isolate ourselves because we can. There's nobody standing there telling us that's not a good idea, and nor should they. We need to be able to kind of flesh this out and figure it out on our own. But it's like a lot of, when we're dealing with mental health and those things, grief is no different, because if I can figure out a way that I can kind of push it down and put it out of sight, out of mind, I'm going to take the easy way out. And that's not what I need to do. I need to be able to process my grief. I need to be able to deal with it in such a fashion that I'm going to be better prepared for the next time.
Yeah. Also, I mean, grief, you could have lost someone. Grief can also lead to suicide.
Yes.
It can, it can lead to you actually taking your own life. So, when you look at it and you talk about it, and for the listeners, Doug putting this book together is not based on research, it's based on personal experience. You know, it's a nonfiction book. Do you want to share, a bit about it? I know in our first chat we did share about it, but do you want to briefly touch on it, on why it was a personal experience for you, if you're comfortable?
Yeah, I'm an open book, so so why it's so personal for me is more, and I'm going to kind of reverse the order here, but the I lost my wife, Deborah, to cancer in 2021, and it was a short battle, which we didn't do very good at dealing with the fight against cancer. That's a whole nother story. But the other thing too was, I think it was in 2007, my mother passed away from, yes, once again, cancer. And so I was going through the grieving process with the loss of my mom, and then ended up, a number of years later, having to deal with much the same sort of thing with the passing of Deborah as a result of cancer as well.
Sure. I mean, that's a lot of grief, going on there. Where do you think you would have been now if you never bring awareness to that grief? Oh,
Oh,
what's the numbers, when people don't deal with it, where are their lives going?
I, where would we be? I I'd like to be able to think that because I'm telling my story and Deborah's story, that we're raising or bringing awareness to grief, and also to some of the factors that play into that. And you've definitely touched on some good points where I know that if I'm grieving and going through that process, that it affects my health, my well-being, because I am more prone to either increasing an illness that I'm already dealing with, or ending up with a illness that could be life-changing, life-debilitating.
Yeah, definitely, in my life, I can only think about, one person that I've lost, who was a close friend of mine. He was actually murdered in 2014. And keep in mind, like we were still in our 20s at that time. And, at the time of hearing about his murder, and once again, young as 21, that was his age, when he was murdered, I didn't know what to feel, I don't know what to feel. I don't know what to make of it. And what you said is right. You just hide it. You don't let it show. You find distractions, so you don't really think about it. You get angry as well. Is that part of the grief process, to get angry? You're angry at the world, you're angry at whoever did it, and there's not much I can really do about it, given that it was a murder. And that anger just stays with you, day after day, month after month, year after year. Yeah, until you finally reach a point where you're like, you know what, I need to bring awareness to it. I need to be okay with the fact, that he's not here anymore. And knowing that, there's still life after death, depending on one's own beliefs. But it's not the end of the road. And I know in presence, spiritual presence, he's still with me, and he's happy and he's okay. So it's sort of like just trusting God, trusting the universe, whatever your beliefs are, the show is open to all religions and cultures and beliefs, you know, and trusting that it all happened for a reason, and that helped me through it, acceptance.
Well, and once again, you've touched on a really good point, and that's the spiritual impact that grief can have on you as an individual, no matter what your beliefs are. But because I know that for me, it altered how I view spirituality. It altered how I deal with things from a spiritual aspect. And it gave me the sense of hope. It gave me the sense of it's okay to feel the way that I do, and I know that I'm going to have to deal with this my way in order for me to get through this, and be able to deal with the grief, versus the way I used to deal with stuff like that was I would just push it down, bury it, and I wouldn't deal with it, and all I was doing was compounding the problem.
Yeah, 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 that makes sense. You just increasing. You know, it's just
Yeah,
gonna be like it brings longevity to the negative emotion, and I'm sure there's cases, throughout the world where it just goes with people all the way to their bed, like all the way. Maybe you suffered grief when you were in your teens or your early 20s or even 30s, and you took it all the way with you, all the
yeah,
way, not bringing awareness to it, being unhappy and depressed all the time, and just, being content with it. It becomes part of your life, and then you find yourself on 10 different types of medication, but it's not really, it's like medication pushes it aside, you know,
yeah.
it pushes it aside. Um, it was last week I spoke to a lovely lady out in Hawaii. So we also touched a lot on spirituality. And she said, in this day and age, because we under attack by all these negative emotions, one form of attack, but at times you just need to allow the feeling in. So if I'm grieving, using what she said as an example, I need to allow it in. I need to feel it. I need to deal with it, accept it, become friends with it. Maybe, I'm just adding that in and move forward with that. If that makes sense,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
makes sense. Instead of
That's
taking pushing the feeling aside and then tomorrow wake up and, nothing's really changed. And that also brought, like a spark to my life as well, because when you live a hectic lifestyle, okay, you enjoy what you do, but it can become overwhelming at times. So you find yourself taking, this vitamin, and then the doctor recommends this vitamin, and then it's that vitamin. But after listening to her, I was like, I don't need it anymore. You know,
no
I'm going to deal with
good.
it. You know? It affects your life. It affects your sleep somewhat, because there are the side effects, even if the vitamin is like A grade and, recommended by all the GPs. But I thought to myself, like, okay, even though my sleep was getting like affected, and this is like literally happened to me in the last week. Okay, after listening to
Yeah,
what she had to say, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stop with the vitamins now. I'm gonna stop. I even went to the pharmacy because see, I was tempted. And I went there and I picked it up, and then something spoke to me and said, okay, you know what, you're not gonna do this, So I put it down. I came home and I said, I'm gonna work through this. So now I was battling to sleep, but then as the days unfold, it gets better. It gets better. So I'm sleeping at 12 a.m. Now it went to 11 p.m. Now it's going to 10 p.m.
mhm.
So I'm getting back into like a healthy routine. So that's what the awareness of it brought to me. So anyone out there who's suffering with grief, listen to what Doug is saying, read what he's talking about in his books, providing all the tools, and deal with it. Bring awareness to a feeling. Face it.
Yeah, that's don't be the sort of person that's going to, "Oh, woe is me," and doesn't wanna actually deal with it and get it out in front, and we're all storytellers by nature, and it's okay to tell or share your story, just like you did today. You've turned a situation that could be viewed as being very negative into something that's very positive, and it helped alter or change how you view life in general. And what you've done is s- you've cut off the possibility of grief managing you, instead of now you're managing your grief.
Yeah, yeah, that's well said. You taken charge. You in
Yeah,
control now, you know. And also what I realize is you find yourself in like up here so much more clear. There's so much more
yeah,
clarity. It's like just open, you know. And I feel like, anyone that's going through grief at the moment, you just look for all the beauty that's all around you. But if you're going to suppress the feelings, with medication and isolating yourself, you're not going to see the beauty of life all around you
no,
and what there is still to live for, because that's what, uh, Deborah would have wanted you to do. That's what anyone who have lost anyone to do is, Doug, I would love for it if you move on, celebrate my memory, celebrate with me because I'm here with you spiritually.
Yeah.
That's what they would want from us.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah, my thoughts. So now with the book itself, so let's jump into the book because we are rather mentioned at first, prior to the questions I want to ask. So in your book, you mentioned tools. Now, I don't need to mention all of it, but you mentioned tools that people can use, within the grieving process. Do you want to share, one or two tips on that? That's
One of the
it's
yeah, one of the main things, the thing that I can't encourage people enough is to reach out to support groups who are, that's a group of people that have experienced the loss of someone or something and are have gone through a healing process somewhat of their own. And I encourage people to reach out and become part of those support groups that um, because that's just going to help you in your healing journey. It's going to help you in formulating, strategies of sort on how am I going to, go through and deal with some of that. So that's definitely one of them. The other thing is that find that circle of friends who are good at listening and hearing and who you can develop a trusting relationship with to share your story and how you're feeling on an ongoing basis. And the more that you can do that, the more that you can push out all that negativity and all of that sadness and sorrow and all of that, the more that you can push that out, get it out of your body, the better it's going to be for you to go through the healing that needs to take place for you to deal with your grief.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And you also mentor, so a grief mentor. So you are also now a source of support for
Yes.
people out there who are going through grief. Now, if I'm looking for a mentor, which is it's not something that's, like mainstream, right? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you say someone, look, I'm a grief mentor, they're going to be like, okay, I've never heard of that. What is that? Because we're so used to colleges, whatever therapy you want to do. So what benefits can being a mentor now bring to one's life that's different from what people normally do?
The big thing is that it's how we support people. And I mean, there's coaching and there's mentoring and there's, a number of other ways that we can. But for me, what I found that has worked really well, and I've done a lot of mentoring of individuals that are dealing with, mental health issues, but, you know, more importantly, that are dealing with grief as a whole. And what I've found is that I've had great success in doing so simply because I listen and hear to what it is that the person I'm working with, what it is they're experiencing. And where it makes logical sense, I'm a storyteller and I share some of my relatable stories that can demonstrate to an individual how they can approach grief as it relates to being part of their healing journey. So as they struggle and go forth, if they reach out to me as a mentor, we're going to have a conversation and we're going to be able to work our way through it together. And that's the big thing, is that people are seeing themselves kind of standing on the island by themselves. And you don't need to do that. You just need to reach out and ask for help, and somebody will be there to help you.
100%. And let's just say, okay, I'm in South Africa and I want Doug to be my mentor. Is your space open to international clients to be
Yes, it
qualified?
is. Yeah, it's wide open to no matter any spot on the face of this dear earth today. if you're in any one of those spots and you have a need for help, just reach out and I'll be there to help you. Not always personally, but I can definitely reach out to you virtually and we can do much the same and have much the same success as though you were sitting right beside me.
100%. It's good that you mentioned virtually. I was actually having a conversation yesterday, when it was regards to AI.
Mm.
And, you know, when you link AI to mental illness and how people are getting so much comfort out of AI rather than having face to face interaction with another human being, those numbers are increasing. But then we did like this quantum, or like quantum thinking now, on why would people go that way. But then you think about it when you look at life, there's so much trust issues in the world, backstabbing is happening in the world. People who say they're your friend are not really your friend. Relationships are falling apart. Marriages are falling apart. It's chaos. It's chaos. And that's, the result of that is okay, I don't trust other humans, so I'm going to get, comfy with AI and AI bots. And I told this individual yesterday that because I'm so curious, I test all technology that comes my way. So I've even tested on bots, and I throw questions and I see how the conversation unfolds. And till date, I can be honest with you, I'm impressed. And the technology is only advancing. So why I mention this is because if Doug is the person for you based on this conversation or what you have managed to find online whilst researching, virtual works. It can work. For me personally, I find so much comfort with podcasts and chatting to phenomenal, humanitarians such as yourself who did with a bigger purpose to help humanity. I find so much comfort in it. It's like I can end the day off like saying, yes, that was like one great positive thing for me for, today, having a chat with Doug. That's a positive emotion that goes through me, when we both log off. So it can work. So you can jump onto a virtual call with Doug, who can be your grief mentor, and you will be surprised what results it can bring. You don't always need to be in the room, with that person. Because how many people go to a psychologist, and they still haven't healed. And that's going every single week,
Yeah.
month after month. And then down the line, I look and I'm like, but what's really changed? What's really changed? Because, you haven't really, this just hasn't showed you where a mentor would show you how to, get to that, the core of where it's all coming from, bring awareness there, start there. They're so focused on, top of the surface. There's medication, medication, medication. Yeah, tell me what's wrong with you. You check, okay, medication, medication. No disrespect to. So that we can conclude that, doing a virtual discussion with the mentor, any form of coach does work in 2025. It's quite effective. You would agree with my conclusion on that.
Yeah, most definitely. Because I know, excuse me, a large percentage of the work that I do is done virtually. And, whether it's just strictly mentoring or it's mentoring with the grief support interwoven into it, in either or case, it's being done virtually.
Nice. And what's your numbers that you do virtually, like just like a ball figure?
Oh my gosh, and to answer that, I guess I would look at it from at any given time, I'm probably working with 15 to 20, 25 people,
Wow.
and I'm only just touching the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. And do you ever do group sessions as well, like virtually, but people from different areas?
Yeah, I've definitely done that. It takes, not only does it take a commitment on my part, but it also takes a commitment on the part of the participants as well, because you got to coordinate your times and then you've got to show up, and that's
Yeah.
sometimes showing up is the biggest challenge. So
Yeah, especially when people are in different time zones. It
Yeah.
does. Yeah, 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 it does, you know. It's like you have to pre-plan that now. You have to get like that go ahead from each party to say, okay, no, we're good with this time. And we take from there.
Well,
So, okay, so that's quite cool.
and it depends a lot of times too whereabouts they are in their journey too, because
Yeah.
they may be more comfortable one on one than they are with half a dozen people in a group setting.
So I'm assuming it's like someone who's just entered the grief process, you know, you would rather do like a one-on-one with them,
Yeah,
you know, because
yeah,
probably you're going to be more comfortable. And as they proceed, you know, and get more comfortable with you and they finally healing, you know, then move them over to a group session. I love it. Love it. I love this era we're living in, you know, how we can communicate and heal each other, you know, worldwide,
yeah.
you know, just by me having this conversation with you, it's healing me as well. And I love that. You know, it teaches me so much, you know, what I can also, you know, do in my life and start practicing in my life. So thanks for that. So to conclude that, if I want to reach out to you, I've suffered with grief, I want to reach out to you, where can I find you?
You know, it's probably the easiest is to send me well, let's go we'll go through so you can reach me through my website through www.talentc, so the word talent with the letter C on the end.ca, and just send me a message, you know, through the contact me's part of the website. Or you can go through LinkedIn. I'm fairly active there and just direct message me. But probably your best bet, and the one I typically recommend to people, is uh, just send me an email message to Doug.Lawrence, LAWRENCE, at Talent C. So the word talent with the letter C on the end.ca. And I'll get back to you as quickly as I possibly can, you know, and we can talk about what we're going to do to enhance your healing journey and all of those good things.
Okay, nice. I'm glad that you're so flexible, you know, when you actually take messages on LinkedIn, you know, you respond to emails. That's good, you know. So I'll definitely share all of those details as well in the description. So, Doc, to conclude with your book, so in your book, you talk about, you know, the grief process can be complex and we find challenges, whether it be psychological, whether it be, you know, socially, emotionally, you know, there's challenges, then you shed light on that. So let's start like the emotional challenges that's come to your attention that's trending the most with people suffering with grief. What sort of emotional challenges do they?
Well, I think what it is the one that seems to be the most prevalent is the expression. Number one, the expression of those emotions, but number two is what's the trigger? What's driving those particular? We'll call them behaviors, for lack of a better choice of words. Why am I, you know, as an example, why when I go to the grocery store and I go to the spot where the gift cards are and I go to pick up a gift card and right away I'm tearing up and I'm having a tough time being able to deal with that. And you know, it that's part of that emotional aspect. And you do get, after a period of time, you do get to a place where you're able to manage those feelings rather than having those feelings manage who you are. Because you don't want to have it where you don't want to go to the grocery store because you're afraid you're going to break down and cry.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't,
yeah,
you don't want life to take us down that path, or we don't want our lives to become consumed with that sort of thing where we don't want to go anywhere because we're afraid of emotionally how that's going to impact us.
yeah. That's a good example you used, you know, going out in public to a grocery store and just breaking down, you know, that's true. That really does happen. And when we talk about the psychological challenges that one faces, that's common. What do we
You
look at
know,
there? Looking at,
sorry.
do we like, is it like overthinking?
We do a lot of that, you know, and you can tie that back to, you know, the psychological piece is that I've already formulated in my mind what the outcome is going to be. So using, the grocery store, I've already formulated in my mind that I'm going to emotionally break down in the grocery store. That's my trigger. And so then I need to be able to figure out psychologically, how am I going to be able to manage that? Like I said before, manage it before it manages me, and
Mhm.
understanding that sometimes those emotional releases are healing for us as well.
Yeah. No, I love when you keep repeating, manage it before it manages you. And once again, me sharing my personal experiences, that happens quite a lot. It happens quite a lot. The thoughts, the emotions, it can be anything. Maybe it doesn't have to be grief, but it's something negative and it just keeps playing and playing and playing. It's managing me, you know? So, like, having this conversation with you, as I say, it also teaches me on working on how I can manage it better, you know? And if I had to like ask you, hey, Doug, how do I manage, these thoughts better, these emotions better, comes to mind?
The most important thing is, and it comes back to, you need to plug yourself into somebody who has been experiencing, or is, the whole grief story, and that's going to give you the extra strength that you're going to need to be able to deal with things, and to understand what triggers what triggers the psychological response, what triggers the emotional response. One of the things that I'm learning more and more about is the aspect of our health as a whole is impacted by grief.
Yeah. Also, I mean, you can give me your opinion on it. I feel at times also an environment can be a trigger. Is that a
Yes.
thing? Can
Yeah.
that be a trigger?
Yeah.
Like your surrounding, where you're living, where you're working, maybe the people around you, that can also be a trigger.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Like
definitely
that's
can. Well,
that,
relationships as well.
yeah,
Relationships which are part of the environment, they're part of who you are as a person. They're impacted by that as well.
yeah. No, that makes sense to me. See what I mean? I'm connecting the dots also in my own life because there's certain negative emotions that I get triggered by, and when I put it down, it's environment, it's certain people, that, as I say, brings out the worst in you. So the last point, from the complexity of grief is the social aspect to it, being so challenging. What's your take on that?
You know, the social aspect of it is that, we did it with COVID. We distanced ourselves, and
Yeah.
it wasn't our own doing, it wasn't our choice. It was, the whole idea of the pandemic and all of that had taken away, or had taken away for the most part, I would say, is probably the best way to describe it. It had taken away our ability to interact, to socialize, to build relationships, to maintain relationships. It had taken all of that away. And what I'm seeing is with grief, that's nothing's changed. That's still there.
Mm,
It's still part of the symptoms from my perspective. It's still part of the symptoms of somebody who, is going through uh, dealing with things on a more global perspective. So every time you turn around, you you go to the bank to get some money, and you're standing in line, and the teller who hands out the money is having a conversation with another customer, and it's all around, yeah, John passed away the other day. He passed away from dealing with cancer, and oh yeah, and Pete, so you've got that's all around us, and we don't know how to deal with it. because it's prevalent no matter which way you turn.
Yeah, makes sense. Bringing up COVID, COVID label a pandemic. And then eventually the lockdowns came to an end and, people got back to socializing again. When we look at grief and we look at mental illness, there is no like deadline on it, you know? It's still continuing and continuing and continuing. Yet, as you have labeled it, it is a pandemic, a serious one that, in my opinion, needs more attention than any virus, any sickness, because the numbers, in suicide alone, because of mental illness, because of grief, is not going down, it's increasing,
No,
it's increasing.
yeah, it's not. And I think back to the time frame of my grandfather and all of that. And back then, people would die, they'd pass away, and everybody assumed that, oh, Jim passed away, and they ruled it as, just that's he's getting up there in years, he's getting old and stuff like that, and we never focused on the things we should have been focusing on is,
Yeah.
what did he actually die from, and what could have been done differently that would have potentially changed the outcome. And if we would have started back then, we'd probably be in a better place today in understanding grief and how to manage grief than what we were, 50 years ago.
Yeah. No, makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Like, if you were sitting in Congress right now, you know, and they ask you, okay, what do we do from our end to actually address, grief and all the emotional trauma and mental illness that we're facing in the world today, which I know they hide, mainstream media also hides it away. Like, what would you tell them? This is what
You
we
know,
need to implement now moving forward to bring more awareness to it.
and you just said the magic word, awareness. That's the big thing is to, you take a look at COVID. So we've weathered the storm, so to speak, and we've dealt with some of the outcomes and that came as a result of COVID. We haven't even begun to touch the iceberg whatsoever when it comes to grief. We haven't even begun to touch what some of the symptoms are and how we're going to manage and how we're going to deal with that. I should be more comfortable in, I'm very fortunate that, Deborah's watching over me and she's guiding me to be able to help other people, deal with their grief and that. But not everybody has that opportunity to be able to do that. And that's more of what we actually really truly do need to do in order to be able to get people to advance on as I call it, their healing journey.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, before pandemic, you say silent, and that's what it is. It's silent. So we need to bring more noise to it, and we need to do it together, and we need to do it globally. Keeping ambassadors wherever you are, wherever you're listening from on this topic. Thank you, Doug, for that. All has been extremely insightful. So grief, the silent pandemic is out. Where can people find it? Where can they buy it?
So the book is available on Amazon.com, so they can they can order a copy of it that way, and there's also a Kindle version, and we're going to be working on here in the not too distant future. We're going to be working on an audio book as well.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, that would be very good for a lot of people out there, yeah, to give them that injection of your advice. No, cool. And where else besides the websites that you mentioned, where else, can people find you online?
Yeah, it's on the website, excuse me, the www.talentc.ca, and the contact page, just go there and then send a message through the website. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm really quite active on LinkedIn, so direct message me through the LinkedIn platform. But how I think you're probably better served if you send me an email direct, excuse me, at Doug.Lawrence, Lawrence, at Talent C. So talent with the letter C on the end, .ca. And like I said, I'll get back to you as quickly as I possibly can, because your good health, your well-being is important to me. And when you reach out to me, that becomes my priority.
Thank you so much. So socially, we're looking at LinkedIn and then contact page on the website, and then direct email would be best option,
Yeah.
to get involved more with Doug Lawrence. Doug, it's been a pleasure, chatting to you once again on another phenomenal book that's been released. I honestly wish you all the best, and thank you for the work that you are doing, to change people's lives and, guide them through the grief process, which is so critically important. And I mean, that's an inspiration for all of us. And I know for my end, all I can do is just keep sharing all of your content, keep sharing this conversation more, keep sharing your contact details more, keep mentioning, the topic more wherever I can, and I mean, wherever you are in the world today, if you know someone who is battling with grief, and you're listening to the show, please refer, Doug, to them. Don't keep quiet as well about it, because then you're like just as guilty, you know, because you never know what the next person might be going through. You may think you're stronger than the next person, but you are not, or you haven't experienced what that person is going through yet. So be a pillar for that person, even if it's a stranger. Even if it's a stranger that has just lost someone recently, whatever it may be, reach out and be like, listen to this podcast. Here's Doug Lawrence. This is how you can contact him. That's all it takes, because sometimes people don't know what to do in that moment. And maybe they don't feel comfortable going to a psychologist, or maybe they can't afford a psychologist, or I'm not comfortable speaking to my family about it because they don't get it. And how they feel and I feel is different, which is understandable. It's being human. My friends will probably just laugh at me. So maybe you are in that situation right now, but yeah, he's Doug, right? Yeah, he's Doug, offering his services to you, offering his time to you, because this is just what phenomenal humanitarians do. So we are. And if you can't find Doug's website for whatever reason, because it is in the description, please reach out to me. You know, please reach out to me if that's more comfortable. It's what I mentioned as well a lot to people, is if you feel more comfortable, using me as a bridge to whoever the guest may be, please do so. You know, please do so. Whether it be on Facebook, whether it be on LinkedIn, whether it be on Instagram, please do, or even if you comment, on Spotify in the comments, just be like, can I contact you? I'm going to be like, yeah, cool, whatever, there. My email address is all over the show. So if you feel more comfortable, going through me, please do that. And I will definitely, introduce you to Doug. So Doug, once again, all the best. Wish you all the best with the book. Good luck with all the projects that you're involved in. And thank you so much, for being a pillar for all of us. And and guiding us. This has been insightful for me as well, And I always feel comfortable with you, where I can just open up about my own personal experiences, which is great. I've also taken a few pointers out of the conversation, what I need to do for my life as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. And it's a pleasure.
Okay. I was just going to say thank you so much for the opportunity to, to share my story and Deborah's story with your listening audience.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. You're always welcome. And I know down the line in this year, we'll see you back on Talking Back to Suicide, because I know on the first episode that you joined us with, you also mentioned grief is coming up. And I know we touched on it, in that podcast as well. So I'm, 100% sure I'll be seeing you on Talking Back to Suicide. Once I informed Diana, look, your book has been released. It's such a critical topic, it's directly linked to mental illness and suicide. And she is definitely going to, want you to come on and talk about the book as well.
Look forward.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.